Hi Tigers, good afternoon. I'm sorry for taking so long to upload this video. Hopefully it all comes out good and I help you with the first part of this spring break homework. Also, I want to tell you that I'm doing this video at Starbucks drinking coffee. Yes, I'm in a very good mood. Hey, if you hear anything in the background, I apologize in advance. I can't control what people do, so unfortunately we're just going to have to deal with it. Okay, expressions and equations. We're going to review a little bit of what we learned first semester about equations. So the first thing I want to bring up is that an equation or an expression is numbers with letters in it, and there is no limit to the amount of terms that you can have in an expression or in an equation. So for instance, let's look at this example. And here's your hint. This example is directly from your homework. Now, I'm not going to tell you what number it is, because to be honest with you, I have no idea what number it is. It's your job to figure it out. All right, so this is 14d minus 9 plus 21k minus 7dk plus 2. Now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 terms in this expression. These numbers in front of the letters are considered coefficients. So the numbers in front of a letter are considered a coefficient. That's a coefficient, that's a coefficient. So if I was asking you, name all the coefficients, it would be 14, 21, and 7. Now, the ones that don't have a letter, which are -9 or 9, and 2 are considered constants. So these are considered constants. So again, if the term has a letter in it, it's considered a coefficient. And if it's just a number inside the expression, it's considered a constant. And the number of terms in this expression are 5. So if you come across a question that's asking you to combine like terms, that means you can only combine the numbers that have the matching letter. So for instance, right here, you have a term with the letter D. Here you don't have a term with the letter, so you can't combine these two. This is saying I have 14 dogs and I have 9 of something that we don't even know. So you can't combine these together, you can't collect them. This one's saying I have 21 kites, so you can't collect kites and dogs, you can't group them together, so you can't even combine any of these 3. Now this one is saying I have 7 dog kites, and I know it seems like we can combine these two to it, but these are separated and these are together, so this is like one unit. So this doesn't even have to be dog kites, it could be like donut kittens or something. You don't know that it's the same D or K that they're talking about over here, so you cannot combine it to this. If you had another number that had DK in it, then you could combine it, but in this case you don't. Here's a constant and here's another constant. So the only thing that you can combine in this expression are these 2 constants, and that's it. So if I were to rewrite this expression, it would be 14d plus 21k minus 7dk, and now I can combine +2 and this -9. Remember, subtraction is not allowed, so I have to change this to the addition of the opposite. What's the opposite of +9? -9. You could have assumed that just by looking at -9. You know that that's going to end up being a -9 anyways. So if you have 9 negatives and 2 positives, how many do you have left over? 7 negatives. Or you can write it as -7. That's fine. But I prefer this way. So this would be combining like terms of an expression. Another property that we learned when we talked about expressions and equations was the distributive property. Let's write that out. Remember, this is my favorite property. This is where you have to multiply the term that's outside to everything that's inside of the parentheses. So this is a direct example from your homework. I'm not going to completely solve it for you, but you know ahead of time that I'm solving your homework questions. So we have -1/5 outside, and we have 2 terms on the inside. I want you to notice that you can't combine -5m to 10. This is saying I have -5 monkeys plus 10 of something that we don't know of. So you cannot combine this and say, oh, we have 5 monkeys, or we have 15, or that would be so wrong. So these are 2 separate things. Now we have to distribute that negative 1/5 to both terms. So draw your arrows, and now you're going to multiply that. So it's negative 1/5 times negative 5m. Okay, so this is multiplication, plus negative 1/5 times 10. And something that you guys should all remember is that each number has a 1 underneath it. So 1. And when you're multiplying fractions or dividing fractions, it's straight across. So what's a negative times a negative? Hopefully you know this, it's a positive. 1 times negative 5m, 1 times 5m is 5m. 5 times 1 is 5. Don't forget this plus. All right, so what's a negative times the positive? Hopefully you know that. That's going to be negative. So now we just multiply straight across. We have 1 times 10, so what's 1 times 10? 10. And what's 5 times 1? 5. Okay, now we can reduce or simplify. How many times does 5 go into 5? 1 time. But you could just write m plus negative, let's see this. How many times does 5 go into 10? 2. So you can write m plus negative 2 or m minus 2. I said I wasn't going to give you the answer, and that's what I did. Well, I'm not going to give you the answer for the other ones. Just remember that the distributive property means that the number that's outside the parentheses has to be multiplied to every single term inside the parentheses. So this question I know for a fact is going to be on your state test, and they're doing it to make sure that you understand multiplication of positive and negative numbers and your ability to distribute correctly. So you have 6y plus 15 minus 4 minus 8y. So this negative changes things. You can't just start subtracting 6y from 8y or negative 8y and 15 from 4. You have to distribute this negative. So in front of every parentheses, there's that invisible 1. Now, if I were to distribute this 1, nothing changes. So I still have 6y plus 15, because 1 times 6y is 6y, and 1 times 15 is just 15. Now, this negative 1 has to be distributed, and that changes things in the second expression. So negative 1 times 4 would change that 4 to a negative 4. So I'll repeat that. Negative 1 times 4 will change that 4 into a negative 4. So now you have minus 4 or negative 4. Or you can write it as plus negative 4. It's the same thing. So again, you can write minus 4, or you can write plus negative 4. These two are the same thing. They're equivalent. Now, negative 8 times negative 1 times negative 8y is a negative times a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So now your negative 1 times your negative 8y turns your 8y into a positive. Okay? So now, I'm going to erase this a little bit. Oh, it doesn't let me erase that 4. All right, so I'm going to rewrite it. Now I have 6y plus 15 plus negative 4 plus 8y. Now I can combine like terms. I have 8 yo-yos and 6 yo-yos. So if I add those together, how many do I have? 14 yo-yos. And if I have $15 and I owe $4, how many do I have left? Remember, same sign, add and keep, different sign, subtract. Keep the sign of the bigger number than you are exact. So for this one, keep the sign of the bigger number, and the bigger number is positive, and subtract them from each other. 15 minus 4 is 11. So this is your final answer. All right, so I'm going to encourage you guys to pause this screen and write it down somewhere in your homework or somewhere on a separate sheet of paper, scrap this paper. So I wanted you guys to realize this. A negative times a negative is going to get you a positive. A negative divided by a negative is going to get you a positive. When you have one negative and one positive and you multiply them or you divide them, your answer is going to be negative. So remember, when you have an even amount or number of negatives, your answer is going to be positive. If you have an odd amount of negatives, your answer is going to be negative. Miss Molina, I don't know what that means. Okay, let's look. Even number of negatives, when they're multiplied or divided, will give you a positive integer. So for instance, right here you have 1, 2. 2 is an even number. So if you have two numbers that are negative and are being multiplied or divided, your answer is going to turn into positive. Now, if you have an odd number of negatives, your answer will remain negative. So for example, how many negatives do you have in this expression or equation? You have 1. 1 is odd, so your answer is going to be negative. In this one, you have 1 negative. That's an odd number of negatives, so your answer is still going to be negative. Even, positive, odd, negative. Another thing that we need to review is inequalities. Remember to always write your inequalities out. Doesn't matter if you're doing a little one-step equation, I still want you to write less than or greater than, depending on what symbol they give you. So you write less than, like this. You write greater than, like this. And remember, these are like arrows showing you in what direction you need to go. So this is an example over here of how your graph will look. So this greater than symbol is an open circle. That means that that number is not included. It's not a solution. And it has the arrow pointing in the right direction. So the arrow is pointing right. Now this less than symbol, this less than symbol right here, is an open circle in the left direction. So another thing you need to remember is if it doesn't have the equal sign on the bottom of it, the circle is going to be open. These have the equal signs on the bottom, so it has to be shaded in. That means the solution is included. So for this one, it has the arrow pointing in the right direction, and for less than, the arrow is pointing to the left. All right, Tigers, hopefully this helped you. One thing I want you to know is that this homework is very long, and I'm sorry that it feels like it's never going to end, but I'm going to make it a little easier for you. So if you have your blue paper, or if you're red class, you have the white paper. I'm sorry, I didn't have enough blue paper to copy it all on blue. Anyways, take out that spring break homework where it tells you what questions to do. Pause the video and take it out. Okay, so now if you're looking at this paper, 1 through 12 says expressions and equations. You are allowed to skip 2 questions from there. So that means if you want to skip number 10, we'll look at number 10 right now. That means you're skipping page 216, and you're going to skip Got It Part 1 and Got It Part 2. That means you get to skip all of 10, okay? So in that little box at the end where it says answer key, I want you to write the word skip, so I know that you skipped that one. You're allowed to skip 2. So if you want to skip number 10 and number 11, you'll write skip on both of those questions. Now, if I were you, I'd choose wisely. I would choose the questions that are the most difficult for me. Not the ones that require the most work, but the ones that are most difficult for me. And then the ones that I see that get skipped the most are the ones that I will go over in class. Okay? Now, you will do that for expressions and equations. Now go to geometry. All right, so I'm going to give you 2 more that you can skip in geometry. And I'm not saying just one question, as in, okay, let's look at number 22. Do you see how that has number 1 through 3? You can skip 1 through 3. You can choose to skip that, because on my grading, it's just considered number 22, and it has 3 parts. Hopefully I didn't confuse you. So again, look at the amount of questions I have. I have 45 questions. You are allowed to skip 2 for each unit. So you're allowed to skip 2 for expressions and equations, 2 for geometry, 2 for ratios and proportions, and 2 for statistics and probability. So you have a total of 8 questions, or 8 boxes that you are allowed to skip. All right, if you have questions about this, please contact me at missmolinamath.weebly.com. You can just submit whatever it is that you have questions on, and it'll go directly to my cell phone. All right, have a good spring break. See you for the next video.